Hello, and welcome back to another tech review you didn't know you needed. So today we're going to take a look at the Switch OLED and some third-party Joy-Cons. So I have the original launch Switch here that I mostly play in dock mode when I do play Switch, which is not too terribly often, but I recently picked up the OLED back at late of last year, just mostly because it was in stock and kind of hard to get, so I grabbed it. And so now I'm trying to play more Switch in handheld mode because that's kind of the whole point why you pick up the OLED. Well, after playing a few hours on the original Joy-Cons, I noticed that my hands started to cramp and feel numb and hurt, so I was looking for other options that would alleviate that issue. So I started my journey looking at a couple of third-party Joy-Cons. I came across the Hori Split Pad Pro, and I tried that out, bought it at Best Buy, and used it for a couple of hours and found that it was too small and I didn't really like it, so I tried these Binboks, which I do like. We're going to go through a little bit of comparison. I shot some of the footage for the Hori a while back because I had already returned it, so I'm going to play that first, and then we'll come back and we'll do a deep dive into the Binbok. We will look at dead zones, firmware updates, so demystify some of the confusing instructions on how to do the firmware update and adjust rumble settings and things like that. And then we'll also look at some of other options that are out there. So let's get to it. So here's my problem with the Hori Split Pad Pro. First of all, I just think, the actual controls themselves, the sticks, the D-pad, the buttons, top-notch quality as Hori usually is. I've used their control pads over many years of from different consoles, and I've always really liked them, and this is no exception. But my biggest problem is with the shape of this thing, and maybe it's the size of my hands, which I think are very medium size, not like giant, knuckle dragging meat hooks or anything. But if you look at the back, here's the problem. There's barely any bulge or grip, so to speak, on the back here, and so when your hands grasp it, you tend to actually have to have your pinkies underneath to support the weight, especially if you're like lying on the couch or lying in bed and you're playing. That becomes really a problem. So that's one thing I don't like about it. And then I played Metroid Dread for about, let's say, a little over an hour and cleared the first level and the first boss. And though the controls worked great, at the end of that my hands were numb and cramped. So kind of defeats the whole purpose of why you would buy these optional Joy-Cons. So one of the things I noticed about at least the analog sticks on the Hori is really good, and also compared to the original Joy-Cons, which are also really good, is just how smoothly you can pan around the edges of the analog stick, and it's pretty smooth. There's no a lot of juddering. Well, the juddering is my thumb, I can't move it that smooth, but still it's relatively smooth, and there's no real dead zones here, and it feels really good. And there's slight dead zone pauses at the 4 quadrants, but I think that is definitely on purpose. So that part is really good, and you could test this and compare against the original Joy-Cons, and it's very similar, except these are nice full-size sticks with a decent amount of travel and height. The other thing to mention is that there is no rumble and there is no gyro motion controls, so just keep that in mind. The rumble doesn't really bother me that much, but the gyro would have been nice to have. Also, there's no battery, obviously, so you have to always use it in handheld mode. The other thing here is you see how I was talking about being able to pan around the edges smoothly of the stick. It's very kind of important in Metroid Dread because that's how you aim, so you kind of need that to be precise and fluid. And as always, I'll have all links that I mentioned in this review down in the description, so please check there. Also, if you could like or subscribe to this channel, that would help this tiny channel out a great deal. First, I do like the size of these Joy-Cons. They do have RGB, so that already makes it better, obviously. But the size is great. It fits my hands pretty well. I like the kind of these grips on the back that kind of stick out, that really give you more support for the weight of the Switch. The triggers overall feel pretty good. I don't really use the back button much at all, but they're there if you want to program them and use them. There's some additional buttons for like setting memory and like toggling the intensity of the vibration. We'll get more to that later. And also adjusting RGB, which I might get to some, but anyway, I just leave it on rainbow and it's fine. Overall feel of the sticks, I would say they're very reasonable. They're very good. I don't know if they're going to suffer drift or not because I haven't had enough time with it. Probably only like 5 or 6 hours now with it at this point. The D-pad feels reasonably good, especially for if you want, for more retro games. It seems to work just fine. The other good things is that it is wireless. It has gyro, so it has motion controls. So that means you can use these Joy-Cons with the wireless attachment, a little adapter. So if you want to use it for another person, when you have people over, that works out great. What's going on? As you can see, it's almost the size of a Pro controller, which I have over here. So here's a quick comparison to the Pro controller. As you can see, it's a bit larger, but actually quite comfortable in the hand. So the Pro controller is excellent. I still love this thing. Whenever I play docked, I'm always using this. All right, so to adjust the vibration, which is not very good. It's a very basic level of vibration of haptics. There's an M button at the top and then there's a T button, and there's one for each side. So the lower button, T button, is what you want to do is hold it down, and while holding it down, then you push the left thumbstick or whatever Joy-Con you're messing with and push it up to increase the intensity, and then down to keep lowering it till you turn it off. I like it on the lowest setting, so just one tap up is good. And then you do the same thing on the right side, so you can adjust the rumble individually for each of the left and right Joy-Cons, but that's how you adjust the rumble. So let's talk about the actual joysticks. Size, travel distance, height, all that feels really good to me, very similar to like a Xbox One controller. The dead zones were horrible with the firmware that came right out the box. It would like really be huge around north, south, east, west coordinates. So it would just get stuck there for a long time. It felt really bad in Metroid. After the firmware update, we'll get to that in a little bit about that, but after the firmware update, it's greatly improved, and it's as good as the Hori now. Maybe a little bit worse, but I can't really tell too much while playing. So there's still a little bit of stickiness at the different compass directions, but on that, it's great. Now I have to warn you, there's two different models that look very similar at the Binbok. This is the full fat one, I call it, but there's a thinner, slimmer one that doesn't come out as far to the left and right. They're not as thick. Those thin ones I have never tried, but I think it would kind of defeat the purpose of why I want a bigger controller for that additional grip and comfort and weight distribution. So I'm going to link to the thick ones, but I mean, you will see thin ones also on Amazon, just to warn you. So here's just a quick size comparison between the Binbok on the OLED and the original launch Switch with the original Joy-Cons. You can see it's significantly bigger, but that's the kind of trade-off you have to deal with. I think it's worth it. It's still pretty portable. It doesn't add that much weight. Here's the original launch Switch with the original Joy-Con, so it's looking at just a little over 14 ounces. Here is the Binbok on the OLED. Looks like it's 1 pound and almost 2 ounces. And finally, the Switch OLED now with the original Joy-Cons. It's 15 ounces, maybe 15 and a half. So yeah, there's a little bit more weight, but I think it's well worth it. So let's talk firmware updates. Okay, so this is a little jank, a little crazy. The way they do firmware updates, or the way you download it, is you have to go through their store, add it to cart, and check out. It doesn't cost anything, but you're buying a free firmware update, and then you can download it. And then there's also a recovery one. So we're gonna just update the firmware. Now, the cool part is you'll have to do each one individually, but it is USB-C, which is nice. So we were going to try and attempt to do this live for you. So here's the file. I have it downloaded, extracted. It is version 303. So the previous version, there was a 127, 128, 129, and it just kind of said like, just try one till one works, which is great instructions. Void 129 like the plague, it screws everything up. The plus and minus keys will stop working, but 128 is what I'm currently running and it's been fine. But let's go ahead and update to 303 since that just came out. So I did do a virus total scan on it. It had like one hit that I think is a fault, so it's probably safe. So now we have a USB-C cable, and we're going to now plug it into the left Joy-Con. Now, to do this, you have to hold down the T button on the back, and then you have to press in, so L3, at the same time, and then plug it in after starting the update program. So I'm holding the T, and this is really hard. Okay, I'm gonna do it this way. I hold down the T with my middle finger, hold down that, and plug it in. And yay, see, it made a beep, and this is update firmware. I think I can let go now and press the update firmware. And it's gonna go from 128 to 303. Here we go. And as easy as that, we are done. Okay, so we are done with that one. I'm gonna unplug it. Let me find my other one. It's behind the computer. I'm gonna do the same thing. Hold down the T, which is, again, the lower one. Push in R3 this time. Good gosh, this is just so awkward. I did it. Press the update firmware. Yes, I want to update it. And let's hope this doesn't jack everything up. So we will test it here right after this is done. All right, we are done with that too. Cool. All right, after the 303 update, we're back to calibrating sticks to kind of check the dead zones again, and it seems good to me. It feels very good. So I'm happy with it. Let's try the other stick. Seems good. Feels pretty smooth. It's good. So definitely upgrade to 303. It's fine. Look, the plus and minus buttons work, so that's good. They didn't screw anything up on this firmware update. So a few more nice features about the Binbok. First, they do charge through the rails, so you can just leave them on. It fits both the original and the OLED docks just fine, so you could just leave them on. You can wake it up using the home button and works just like regular Joy-Con, so there's no issues there. It doesn't really disconnect very often. I think it DC'd once on me and it was just for a very short second and then reconnected. So overall reliability of the connection seems solid. I played it for many hours and I find it very comfortable for what it is. But how about accessories? We definitely want a case if you want to travel with the Binbok, and I found this one for the Hori actually, but it fits the Binbok just fine. It's about $23 and it's a little bulky, but it fits pretty well. Now compare that to a standard Switch case. Yeah, it adds quite a bit of bulk. But I think it's a fair compromise for having bigger Joy-Cons. Speaking of drift, so my launch Switch, the left original Joy-Con had horrible drift. It was just jacked up in all sorts of ways. But actually the process to send it into Nintendo and get it turned around, it was completely free, really painless. They took care of it, and I had a replacement probably within about a week, week and a half, and it works great now. So I mean, sure, it'd be nice if they didn't drift it in the first place, but I think support-wise, they've done a really good job. So let's talk about some other options. Here's this crazy phone-like clip that you can buy for like 13 bucks that fits the Pro controller, which is my favorite controller, like I said, for the Switch. And you can use it that way and clip on your Switch without Joy-Cons on, and it works, and you have plenty of angles and adjustments, but the weight distribution, no matter what you do, is gonna feel awkward and kind of heavy. So it's a cheap option, and it works fairly well for what it is, but ideally I prefer, my Joy-Cons attached to the Switch. So some other options you could consider, there's the grips that you can use. If you are fine with the size of the original Joy-Cons, and that doesn't bother you as far as like travel distance and as far as the height goes of the actual analog sticks, if you're good with those and you're happy with them, then you can get something like the Satisfy grips. I will leave a link in the description. They have just the grip for $30, and then there's a bundle that comes with a case and USB-C cable for $50. So overall, that's not a bad option, and it's going to be definitely a more compact way to travel. It's probably going to be a little bit smaller than the giant case I showed you earlier for the Binbok. So overall, I'm very happy with the Binbok. I highly recommend it. I don't know how long they'll last, but for 50 bucks, I don't think it's bad. The Hori Split Pad Pros are also $50, so price-wise, they're very comparable. Unless you have really small hands, you're probably gonna find the Hori too small for you. I would say buy it at like a Best Buy or someplace easy to return, and try them out for yourself, because it's really a subjective personal thing. But for me, it's the Binbok. I hope you found something useful and informative in this review, and I'll catch you in the next one.